What is the most awkward accidental physical contact you've had with the opposite gender? Viewers Edition. Story 1. I was the stage manager for my theater class in high school. The previous day, I assisted the costume head in measuring the actors, but on this day, the costume head wasn't there, and one actor still needed to be measured. Since everyone else was busy and I knew what to measure and how, I was sent to measure her. So we went to the theater room, where the measuring tape was. It was also completely empty and far away from everyone else, and I had to measure her. She was a few years older, and while I'd known her for a year, and we'd worked together before, we were never that close of friends. It was awkward. She was wearing a crop top and shorts, and I had to measure tightly around her neck, shoulders, waist, hips, legs, and chest. We both tried to act as if it wasn't weird, joked about the process, and talked about previous experiences getting measured, and then I had to take the measurement I'd been dreading, the inseam. I asked if she knew what it was, and she had forgotten. So I had to explain how to put the measuring tape up and in between her legs, and then I had to get down on my knees in front of her to measure to her ankle. Having to hold the measuring tape against her body while she tried to stay still was extremely awkward, and I didn't want to weird her out or seem perverted, as this was already uncomfortable for us both. When we finished, we returned to rehearsal, and everything was fine, but I still can't stop feeling awkward about it. Story 2. All the neighborhood kids are swimming on a hot day in Florida in the pool. I just wanted to dive and swim around or jump in. My friend wanted to push me in, but her hand slipped off my back, and I only lost my balance, but also I accidentally grabbed and flung her into the pool instead. Turned out I ripped her top off by accident in front of all our parents. Her mom told me to run home, so I did with my father, not really knowing what happened. We still joke about it like 15 years later. I'm on break from college and not doing too well mentally. I met up with a close friend and met his neighbors, whom one of them found out she was getting cheated on by her then boyfriend. We were all chatting, and as the only two that didn't need to go to class or work the next day and just wanted to get out, she invited me over to hang out. I legitimately fell asleep on her couch and woke up to her in only a towel fresh from a shower. I didn't know what to make of the situation, as she was looking at the TV before she left to go to her room and just dropped the towel by the door. She came out dressed later, and we chatted, and then she found out I'm actually celibate. She blushed hard and apologized and realized how awkward and the lack of communication there was between us, and just honestly chatted after that. We're still great friends, though. She moved away to California. Story 3. I'm a triathlete, and I was out on my bike in winter. It was getting dark, and even though I have lights, it was getting extremely cold too, even for winter. So I decided that I would take the train back home. This story is probably easier to understand if you know the layout of the seats in German trains. While I was standing there with my bike, one of those two girls, who were my friends, who were sitting there on the side seats, started to pick dirt away from the kind of muddy rear tire of my bike. She didn't know that I'd noticed, but I thought I'd just let her do this, because even though it's completely pointless, it also won't hurt my bike, and if she has fun doing that, why not? I even overheard her whisper to her friend with a grin in her voice that she just needs to clean them. Guess she was into bicycles. I also guessed that she probably was so focused on her cleanup job that she didn't realize where her hands started to go, because suddenly I felt a pinch in my leg right below my butt, followed by a surprised, "Oh, you didn't just do that," sigh sound from her friend, and a sorry from her. At first, I was kind of overwhelmed by that situation, but I think this is kind of hilarious. I was as dirty as my bike, and I guess she wanted to clean me too. And yes, I still look back at that and think that I probably missed out on great wife material. Story 4. Happened to me once, but only I was feeling uncomfortable, I think. So this girl was sitting behind me. We sat like the furthest from the teacher desk. I don't know why, but she always walked forward and then walked past behind me. I got to move my chair inwards to give her space to walk behind me to go to the teacher. Well, so at this one time, I remembered letting her pass me, but then the teacher was talking about something, and I was too focused on the teacher, so focused that I didn't see or hear her, but I'm pretty sure she said, "Excuse me." And, well, I kind of placed my hand on the back of my chair to help my body turn to face the teacher. So, yeah, was listening, then suddenly felt her behind, brushed against the back of my hand. I was so freaking embarrassed and lost focus on the teacher. Looked at her, but she didn't look like she cared or anything. I'm dead sure she knew what just happened and felt it too, but she looks so fine with it. While I'm there freaking out because I kind of touched a girl's behind. Happened when we were 12. But yeah, was a chicken and didn't really dare to apologize for not hearing her and feeling that. By the way, yeah, no, I'm dead sure that girl didn't have feelings for me, so yeah. That's what happened quite a while back, but I can't get the feeling of that and the embarrassment out of my head. Story 5. A really awkward situation that happened in high school. I was shipped with my best buddy Joe, not his real name, but that was the best I could come up with, because apparently I'm always seen around him everywhere I go, which is kinda true, but I just have a hard time speaking to others in my class. We were just chilling, talking to each other in the class, when this one annoying classmate ran around the room and accidentally bumped really hard into Joe, pushing him towards me and knocking some chairs, making a really loud noise. I felt like I had the air inside my lungs pushed out. Certainly wasn't a pleasant experience, falling onto your back on the cold, hard floor. Everyone in the class turned around, looking at me and my friend in the middle of knocked back desks and fallen chairs, with his hands on my chest, pinning me to the ground. Let's just say that the guy that bumped into Joe never apologized, was being cheered by some other boys, while the girls were kind of just squealing and screaming stuff like, "I told you they were together." I faked sick to not go to school for 2 days because I was so mortified by that single moment. Even now, when I think back about it, I just want to curl up into a ball and scream into a pillow for how awkward it was. Story 6. Well, I'm probably never going to say this otherwise, so here it goes. At my job, there's a small hallway where we go to place boxes in the back to get picked up. I work in shipping. I had just finished setting down a box and got up to walk back out front, only for my coworker and friend to be walking in. My hand brushed against her stomach, and her face ended up inches from mine. I'm a male, by the way. I honestly see her as a sister, but nonetheless, the good Christian boy in me was completely embarrassed. While I was apologizing profusely, she started laughing. I'd never been more relieved. Another time, she was arguing with me that I hadn't taken my lunch break, which I often shrug off for a couple of hours, and I was going back to work at the register when she blocked the way with her arm. I ran into her again, and she was relatively close to me. She then proceeded to gently whisper, "Please, just go take your break." Just to reiterate, I see her as a sister now, but I'm too embarrassed to say at the moment. I found her assertiveness a little attractive. I just stood there for a second, completely flabbergasted, before I barely started out the words, "Okay," and went to eat. Really messed with me. Story 7. I was at a sleepover last year, about 10 guys and one girl I have a crush on. We were playing Truth or Dare, but because we have no creativity, we used an app that gave the truths and dares. It was the girl's turn and she picked Dare. It said she could close her eyes and everyone should take turns giving her their hand, and she had to guess whose hand it was. It was fine, although probably quite awkward for her, and I was the last in line. So I gave her my hand, trying not to make it too weird. Not necessarily accidental, but certainly awkward. I didn't think of it at the time, but looking back on it, I think they might have been setting me up with her because they knew I have a crush on her, since we exchanged our crushes at the previous sleepover where there were no girls, but they probably didn't because that would be pretty cringy. We were all 14 and 15 at the time, so none of us were drunk. I'm good friends with the girl and have held her hand a few more times after, although never romantically. Still have a crush on her, but probably won't have a relationship with her. Story 8. This was a decade ago. Me and this girl I had a crush on went to visit a couple of friends to join us for a walk. At one friend's house, front yard, they had a tree with fruits hanging down. While waiting outside, I got one that was close enough to be grabbed from the ground, then she snatched it off my hands. So, in instinct, my hand went to grab the fruit, but I noticed that she had her hands literally on her chest, so I moved away, but she also moved away by facing to another direction, then held the fruit up. So, yeah, I grabbed her boo-baloo-baloobies accidentally. She blew raspberries on me, and, being me a teenager, I squished her boo-baloo-baloobies twice before letting go, which made both of us blush. Then she just shushed me, and we continued the day without talking about it, of course. A couple of months ago, we met again and finally talked about it to finally give some closure to the awkwardness. She again teased me in front of her boyfriend, who treats me like an elder brother, to squish her boo-baloo-baloo-baloobies again. I knew she was kidding, but I just glared at her and apologized to her boyfriend. Story 9. This was in high school during phys ed. We played some ball game. I don't remember which one since we played lots and lots of different types. And while focused on catching a ball being passed to me, I didn't look where I was starting to run. There was a girl in my way and I tripped right into the back of her legs. She folded and I got stuck between her butt and her feet with my abdomen. We somehow got so entangled, it took a solid 10 seconds and help from the teacher, he stood a few meters away, before we got out of this weird as frick position. I still can't wrap my head around how that happened. Like, what the frick? How did I manage to fall so perfectly that my left arm got stuck between her thighs, making her unable to stand up since my arm was pulling her down onto me, and my legs now firmly pressed onto the ground and against her legs, making me unable to get my left arm out. Like, what the F? The worst part of this was that the girl was my crush at the time. That was so weird. Oh my god, luckily neither she or I got hurt. Story 10. I made contact, but not with my body. I was helping my church with a function they were having for hundreds of children by dressing as one of the mascots they were using from kids' TV shows. There was another mascot, a girl around my age, who was fine as heck. After dancing around with the kids and sweltering away in our suits, the whole thing finished and all the mascots went to a room to take off their costumes. I was thirsty in more ways than one, but the second that I took my headpiece off, I breathed a sigh of relief. As it turned out, I was so thirsty that a wad of dry spit in the corner of my mouth flew out like a missile and hit its target, the forehead of said hot girl. She winced the second it landed. Right then and there, I wanted to cease existing. As she wiped it off, I told her to pretend it was a leak from the ceiling. Long story short, that was one phone number I never got. On the upside, I like to keep hydrated nowadays. Story 11. I think everyone had that crowd lining up in a queue or walking through a corridor back into the school where you had to avoid a lot of weird accidental touching. I was lined up, squashed onto my friends in front of me, which is fine. We were used to that. I felt someone squashed very full-bodied behind me. I thought it was another girl, but when I saw it was my crush, I jumped out sideways and caused a lot of ruckus, making everyone stumble and get pushed forward like dominoes. It was so weird how he didn't move. He had space. He also tried to ask me out a while later, which I mumbled some excuse, and ran away from him. I did like him a lot, but I have a problem with avoiding feelings. To him, it must have felt like a devastating rejection to have the girl you like literally run away from you multiple times. Even now, as a 22-year-old, I still run away from any potential relationships. I've never been in one. Story 13. This might be pretty important to know. I'm a boy. I was in Taekwondo class, and we were doing this exercise where we would stand about 3 feet away from each other, and if you move one of your feet even a little, then you lose. And we couldn't push each other over, we had to block, and they'd kind of lose balance. Anyways, I was up against a girl that was taller than me. By the way, I won, and my mouth was probably up to the same height as her pubes. I'm 12, and she's like 20, I think, and when she blocked at one point, I lost balance, and I didn't fall backwards, I fell forward into her beebalubas. We had a few awkward moments of silence. I'm staring at her, almost terrified, because I don't know what to say, and she is almost on the ground dying laughing. Then we just continue training. It was very awkward, at least in my perspective. Story 14. Was standing in line for the tour of Chichen Itza. My wife and I had joined at different times as I needed to set my brother up with something. He doesn't speak Spanish, so my wife was several people ahead of me. I started zoning out as it was freaking hot, and started stroking my wife's shoulder, as I usually do when we're waiting in lines. That's when I remembered that my wife was several people ahead of me and realized that I was stroking the shoulder of some random Mexican woman. Fortunately, her husband had a good sense of humor and possibly saw the look of horror on my face, and the woman went so far as to say the mistake was quite flattering, as my wife is quite attractive. My saving grace with my wife was that 2 days later, on a different tour, her phone went flat and she put it in a random German man's pocket before realizing that it wasn't me. Story 15. In elementary school in 2012, I was at my Boys and Girls Club. The way they took attendance was sitting outside forming a square. I had my backpack on so I could lean on it like it's a futon. This girl, who I don't remember her name, was sitting in front of me. She decided to move closer to me and lay her head on my chest. I wasn't really paying attention or noticed girls at the time. I was just looking forward to the after-school activities. I didn't do this to enjoy the moment, for your information. To not lose my balance or fall far back on my bag, I wrapped my arms around her and placed my hands on her belly. She had a short shirt. Here I am, over a decade later, thinking to myself, man, that was probably my first time getting to second base. Story 16. My similar story. I was a student assistant at a summer camp and had a few colleagues my age who would help. One of the summer activities the camp did was to swim every Friday. The assistants could participate if they wanted to. Me and a few others did. We went swimming and one of the girl assistants ended up slipping and falling into the pool. I jumped in fully clothed and managed to pull her out. However, I somehow managed to grab a handful of her chest while pulling her to safety. Most of the staff and children were clapping and applauding me for my heroism, but all she did was awkwardly look away from each other from embarrassment. I apologized, and I eventually became good friends with her. We're still good friends to this day. She likes to bring it up a lot. Story 17. There was this one time when this girl by mistake held my hand and we both looked into each other's eyes for a second. That was probably the first time I got real excited seeing someone. We stayed like that, staring at each other's eyes for probably a minute, while the whole college grade saw us staring into each other's soul, that we decided it was time to stop. My body, for some reason, heated up. I didn't get hard or something, I just got heck excited. I don't know, it felt safe and sound for a second. Never got the same feeling ever again, because I never touched a girl ever again after that. I don't know, my soul felt complete for a second, but later I found out she was a witch, who kinda already invited all the boys in our college out on a date, so yeah. Story 18. Me and a friend of mine were walking down a hallway at school heading outside. I'm a clumsy guy, so while she's there, carrying some drawing books in front of her in that classic anime schoolgirl style, while we chat about random stuff. My right shoe decided at that moment it had more friction than trying to rub sandpaper on other sandpaper. I tripped and instinctively slammed my hand on the wall next to her head. She got confused and asked me what I was doing, and I charmingly proceeded to just give a stupid grin, like I planned this. I creeped her out, and I felt like a complete idiot. We just kinda forgot about it later on, but I still haven't told her to this day I didn't try to do a wall slam moment. Story 19. In phys ed class, we had to do an exercise of grabbing a ball from the teacher's hand, and coincidentally, the person I had to compete against was my crush, who then became my girlfriend, recently wife. Anyway, I held back to not humiliate my crush, but I ended up crashing against her, and I fell to the floor, and she fell on top of me. While I was dizzy because of how hard I had hit my head on the concrete, I accidentally touched her butt, and after realizing what I did, I got her off me and told her sorry, but she just gave me a smile while I was weirded out and embarrassed as heck. Story 20. It wasn't completely accidental, but I didn't realize I was riding a bicycle to my way home, and a bunch of people started gathering on the middle of the road because of a rare car, and there was a college girl standing there whom I didn't notice. After waiting for more than 10 minutes, I started to ring the bell on my cycle furiously and kept pushing others to get on my way, and I accidentally pushed that girl so hard on her stomach that she fell down on her back. She wasn't hurt, but it was very awkward. Everyone was staring at me like I was a thief who got caught red-handed. Story 21. I've got a weird one. It was back in middle school. Me and a few of the other students were sitting around a table, working on an assignment. I leaned back to stretch when my head hit something. I look back and see one of the girls standing behind me. Let's just say my head ended up on her chest. I swear I had no idea she was behind me. To make me feel even more awkward, one of the boys leans in and asks what they felt like. That was quite a day. Story 22. I took Judo when I was in college. Judo chop! I kept getting paired up with this attractive girl. The particular throw she kept trying, can't remember the name anymore, involved grabbing my sleeve and turning around, trying to pull me over her shoulder. One of the best defenses is to go limp, but the effect of this is that she kept pulling my hand against her chest. I didn't do anything to intentionally cause it, but I sure didn't do anything to prevent it either. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.